Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Mitten Backstage. Thanks so much for joining us. Today, I am chatting with Lee Heerspink. Now, I met Lee through the BlueWater Kings Band network. I had first seen his name when reviewing Derek Brown's beatbox sax original music album with the Holland Concert Jazz Orchestra, and Lee Heerspink was part of that album, and I, saw that name, and we got connected through BlueWater Kings a few months later. And earlier this year, he hired me along with Caleb Elzinga, a name you might recognize from the podcast, or in groups like Blushing Monk or Joe Hertler and the Rainbow Seekers, and then also Jim Alfredson and Randy Marsh, who play together in Organissimo, and they're just mainstays of the Michigan music scene. A lot of different projects that they're involved in. That record, Monsters Impromptu, is currently out, and there will be an album release show. If you're listening to this the day this episode drops, November 12th, and you happen to be in the Grand Rapids area on November 13, so this Saturday, you can check out the concert. Doors are at 6. The music starts at 7:30. So come early, get relaxed, and enjoy some good tunes. It's a great album and some great people involved, so it's fun to have it all put together. But if you enjoyed today's conversation on the podcast and want to support all the different podcasting things that I do, you can head on over to patreon.com/Snedeker. There, you can get early access to podcast episodes, also exclusive merch, and more. You can also head over to DutcherSnedeker.com to see everything else that I'm currently up to around the internet. And don't underestimate the value of your social currency. If you are on socials and you want to share the podcast with your friends, whatever way you want to tell people about it, that helps push the content out. All right, enough of this intro. Let's just get right into the conversation with Lee Heerspink. Mostly podcast work and just seeing some friends for a second.
Cool. That's great.
Yeah, how was 17 students?
Yeah, I think that's what I get on Tuesdays. Tuesdays and Wednesdays are just bananas. It's good. It's all ages, all experience levels. It's cool.
Yeah. Is it pretty much
busy.
just one after the other? I would just like half-hour lessons, or?
Yeah, I do half-hour lessons. So Tuesdays and Wednesdays I'm at Avalon School of the Arts in Holland. So they keep me pretty busy. I do homeschoolers during the day on Tuesdays, and then kind of leads into the evening. So but it's cool. It's nice.
Yeah. Sounds like getting that many students is sometimes it's tricky. So
But it can be, but it's nice. And I've had some for so long now that like, it's been fun to kind of watch them grow. It's been a couple of years now since I started there. That stuck with me. Some of them do ukulele and like what, just some other things, and like they do really well. So it's been fun to kind of do all that stuff.
yeah, just to have like a little, I don't know, there's that mix of like, I mean, I've never really had students, but I remember as a student in with the various teachers, it was nice to like kind of have that shared, like, okay, we're all learning from the same person, we're all kind of progressing the same, like it's nice to have peers as much as it is probably to be a teacher and be like, hey, they're getting it, and they're going beyond just like playing guitar, they're learning another instrument, or they're, I don't know, doing something with it.
Yeah, it's good. And you start to get relationships with these students out in time, and it's so much fun to just to be that comfortable in a room with someone, where at first it's always like you're kind of feeling things out, and you're like, is he joking? Is he not joking? You know what I mean? But after a while, my students get to understand like my wonky sense of humor, and like they're cool with it, and so we're all on the same page that I can just make fun of myself all the time, and they laugh now, and it's great. So
Yeah, sometimes it's just giving permission to like, like, hey, if you mess up, it's not the end of the world.
right,
It's like this is the time to make mistakes. I've had teachers where it's like every teacher has some version of saying that, but I've definitely had teachers who are like, yeah, you don't really want me to mess up though, or have any like, like, oh yeah, I didn't get to practice because I have soccer and school and I had 3 practices a week, and they're just like, all I hear is excuses. You're like, I have a whole life other than the piano, but okay.
Mhm. Yeah. No, no,
Yeah,
that was good.
yeah. Are is the goal? Well, I guess, yeah. Like, I think of the goal. Some teachers are like, I really want my students to compete. Others are like, I don't even care if they play their instrument right. Other people are somewhere in between. Trying to get enough people engaged, but without putting, I don't know, too much pressure on them so they don't quit music. But yeah,
Yeah, I mean, that's tough. Everybody
student to
comes for different
student.
reasons. Yeah, it's totally student to student, and everybody comes for different reasons. I think um, it's super exciting when you have people that could go somewhere, but you don't want to like scare them either,
Yeah.
because you're like you got something, you know what I mean? But you don't want to freak them out either, you
Yeah,
know.
they don't want to be
And
like, what do you mean the spotlight is on me?
right. But I have some students, man. I'm just like, wow, sky's the limit. Like, keep going, and just being optimistic and encouraging rather than creating an atmosphere of fear. Like, if you don't do this, then you're you're a disgrace. Do you know what I mean? Like, not trying to
Yeah,
put that pressure on them, but at the same time, like, hey, if you're into it, if you're loving this, and you want to go down the rabbit hole, like you can go far, and um, just trying to kind of strike that tone where it's just optimism rather than leading them out of fear.
yeah, it would. I feel like that's a lot of, I hear from people who are in music who are just, maybe they started playing music young, just, you know, the, glean some things from YouTube videos, some from, their favorite bands or whatever. And then they get to a point where you know, they're talking to me at a show or something, and they're, like 28, and they're like, oh, I really do want to start learning theory, and I want to figure that all out. And, they had this misconception that like, oh, if I'm going to study it, it like becomes less fun. So I'm just going to avoid studying it. And
Yeah,
it's like, well, it depends on, I guess, who you study it with or how you study it. Like, I feel like, even though I'm out of school, it's like I'm never going to stop learning. Like, I don't think any musician stops learning anything.
right. And that's kind of the like the exciting thing, and that's when you get out of school, you're like, okay, well, what next? And then you're like, okay, well, it's not like something's due in a month or two or something, and you take a deep breath and you're like, wow, okay, I get to work on this stuff for the rest of my life, which you can unpack stuff from academia throughout the rest of your life, which is cool too. But
Yeah.
it's a nice realization. You just kind of like get to exist and slowly. And my wife calls me the turtle because I like move slowly and in a direction. And music's definitely one of those things where it's just like I just continue to slowly just move on a trajectory, and um, I'm I'm good with that. After hustling from thing to thing for years and doing that, it's nice to just like be me, know that I'm slowly progressing, doing that thing and just being at peace with that. Like, it's pretty nice.
Yeah, because you were, I mean, you mentioned it before when we've hung out or just been in the car on a gig, and um, you were in the, I don't remember which branch, but you were in the military at some
Yeah,
point.
I was in. Yeah, um, so I was in a regional Air Force band.
Hmm.
Um, so I did that from 2010 to 2014. Went and auditioned, and um, yeah, it was pretty competitive, um, but it was cool. It was a nice situation too, where I felt like a lot of it played to a lot of my strengths as somebody who could play utility.
Right.
Um, as somebody who could, switch on a dime and one night be playing in the country rock band, the next night be doing a solo jazz gig at, some important person's place.
Yeah.
And then the next night I'd be singing the national anthem. It was just bananas. But that was kind of part of the fun part, and it felt appreciated for, which as a utility player, sometimes it's hard to find. So that was
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. I feel like that's a strength that people don't, yeah, it's like, even, like, it takes a second for even some musicians to kind of be like, oh yeah, you like, you do more than one thing. Like, you're kind of starstruck, at least, I think of my experience finding out about musicians or styles of music. You're like starstruck about, like, wow, they play lead guitar so well, and then like you only see them like that, and then suddenly you see them out of that element talking about a different thing, or it's like, oh, I didn't know they had another business venture or something. And it's like, yeah, musicians are often at least multi-layered, not necessarily all of them being able to like flip on a dime and do a bunch of different styles. um
Mhm.
because I think also, so, like, we're both in BlueWater Kings, and you would think a lot of the players in that roster would be utility players, and some of them are like, they're still learning how to be that full kind of utility player.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know. It's there's as with anything. I mean, there's pros and cons to to that kind of thing, because it's easy to just kind of chase your tail or get blown by the wind too.
Hmm.
When gigs or certain things pop up, you're like, if you're taking everything, then you're not really moving in a direction either. So it's kind of hard to, you know, it's again, yeah. There's pros and cons to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely feel that going into, you know, heading towards 2022. Um, it seems like I can't say no enough. Like, I've said no more times, I think, in my whole life, that, in the last year and a half. And yet I still, for the big chunk of the year, it was like, okay, doing Earth Radio stuff, that's cool, but still have a lot of weddings, still have a lot of other, you know, session work that's kind of pulling me away from ideas that I have that I want to, start workshopping. And I'm looking forward to, even though it'll be a couple months working on a musical, it's like I'll have more of a schedule that I can plan around, instead of just, every day being like, I could either do all of the work or none of the work, and
Yeah.
just see what happens. Um, but yeah, because was that part of the reason for, getting the album together, just kind of in the right place, right time, like workshopping songs, or had you been sitting on those songs for a while?
Um, well, I had some of them. I retooled a couple of them. Um, I knew that, so I booked the date knowing that I had enough in the bag, or in the, I don't know what,
Yeah,
in the cabinet file.
guitar
I don't. Yeah,
case.
I had enough. I had enough charts to do it from stuff that I had done at school. So I had that as like my backup plan. I was like, hey, if if the writing's not going well, I have stuff
Hmm.
that we can do. And then as we started getting closer to the date and kind of the concept for the album started coming a little bit clearer, and kind of what I was doing and the personnel finally got locked in. That's when I was able to kind of get down there and get in the nitty gritty. And um, yeah, and I was surprised at how quickly I was writing, because I think
It's like early April we
I
did
think
the
five,
session.
yeah, I think 5 or 6 of the tunes I actually wrote um, a couple months, 2 or 3 months before.
Oh, that's
So
cool.
it was, yeah. So it happened pretty quick, and then I pulled a couple of the old ones out, and again just kind of retooled them. So I kind of went into it. I booked the date knowing that I had enough stuff if it came to it, but I didn't. I definitely wanted to go in a new direction, because a lot of the stuff was, I don't know, it was cool, and I might dust some of the stuff off and retool some more stuff that I have for later dates, but it was nice to kind of like do most of it all at the same time, because I think that in itself kind of creates its own thing,
Mm-hmm.
rather than feeling like you're just kind of pulling and grabbing and scatter, doing this stuff. So
Yeah. That I felt like that whole session just the nature of like having that band together and then doing, a lot of work in the time we booked. uh it felt like that character and the dynamic of us all working together like adds to the flavor of the album.
yeah, the chaos of, I mean, I wouldn't call it a moonshot by any means, because
Right.
you guys are all pros and sounded fantastic, but I knew that the charts were, I would say, in the gray area of what we could accomplish in 24 hours. It was getting, they're not overly complex, but there were little things in the arrangements that it would have been really easy for people to miss, or for things to happen. And I was surprised that, really, I mean, we had about 2 takes ish on about everything, and that was about it. We were out before dinner time.
Yeah.
which was kind of shocking. I think we were all like, all right, well, you'll see you next time.
Yeah, it's that little that's one thing I get asked about, you know and I'm sure you get asked about it too, like doing recording work, and they're like, oh, what do you do, like how do you get sessions done? It's like, you are prepared. And, there's some sort of plan, even if you're not like, even if I'm not in there being like, here are my exact notes. It's like, okay, I'm on a folk song, they want a solo, it's in G, and go. Like, just like some sort of framework, other than just like, yeah, do it. Do what? What do you want?
Yeah, and I I tried. I was pretty meticulous about the charts. That was one thing that I did spend a ton of time on the front end with, is just making sure that everything was as clean and laid out and specific as possible. Because I always figured you guys could, um, you know, do less. Like if you didn't want to, or you didn't care about the certain things in there. But I tried to put as much information into the charts um, as I could without making it hard to read.
Right.
So that was something that I know it's always been important for me when composers are bringing new stuff in. Just make sure it looks clean or halfway decent, so that I'm not, stuff as small as making sure that for the most part, like, the measures are lined up. Make sure that if it's a page, like, hey, 4 measures to a line, those kind of things. So it just makes it so much easier to look at, so much easier to read. So that, I don't know. I don't know if that helped or not, but
I
I
thought it
like
helped.
I like to think it. I like to think it did.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it definitely helped, because it's, yeah, that's a something that I thought would be kind of second nature, interacting with all sorts of music students when I was in school. And yet, like, okay, yeah, the composition majors, they're outlining it very clean. They know how to dress up sheet music. And then, so many players would just like, would, they'd get on finale and they just start MIDI playing their idea, and they wouldn't, quantize it or line it up or edit notes or make things easier to read. And, you know, I just remember getting handed like, oh, do you think you could perform this? And it's like, like, did a machine make this? Like the my hand can't do 15ths. Like that's not like, what do you did you even try playing this? Like, and yeah, to have like a jazz chart that, because yeah, like some of those songs aren't just like, AABA or keep looping it. It's like, oh, we do this and then there's this part and then we go back here and then there's this coda and we might alter it, but everything was at least organized, so you know everyone had a point of communication rather than being lost at what part was where.
Yeah, yeah, and that was. I think that was. Yeah, I just wanted to eliminate as many like um, as much talking as possible. I mean, to be honest, I mean, just because I knew it was going to be a waste of time, and if we were trying to figure out things that I could figure out up front and just make it as clear as possible, that would save us just a boatload of time.
Yeah.
So going through and also like timing stuff out, figuring out how many solos we were hoping for. Timing out, okay, well, if it's 2 solos on this song, that's going to put us at about anywhere from 6:30 to 7 minutes. Kind of having like just a decent outline of what that was like, referencing uh, other kind of groove based records too, like SCO stuff, Jim and Randy's old records, just seeing how long some of those sat, and just trying to get an idea of where we were, because I just didn't want to sit there and be like, okay, well, if we had this person or if we had another solo, which I think we talked about a couple times on stuff, but we pretty much had an idea of who was soloing where and how long the tracks and stuff were gonna land.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And was there, because when I think like, okay, guitar, organ, drums, like organ trio, like there's the band, and then to add keys and sax, it's like, it opens up more textures, more sounds, and more things. I was trying to think of like a band that, like Corey Henry's band comes to mind, where it's not Snarky Puppy, where you expect 10 layers of every instrument, but he mainly leads the band from an organ, and then there's another synth player, a guitarist, and then I guess a bass player is added in, so it's not a you know a bassless quintet.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was curious of like if there was like a, like, oh yeah, in the 80s this happened and that was cool and I thought to try that. I don't know.
No, well, a lot of it was, I mean, some of it was happenstance, um, I was grabbing personnel. I was, the person I was looking for, on bass fell through.
Hmm.
And so I was kind of circling back and trying to think about bass players that would fit the kind of thing. And that was about the time that I got Randy on board.
Hmm.
And then Randy had mentioned, well, hey, you should talk to Jim and see if he'd be
Right.
interested in it, which I was like, all right, that would be excellent. And so when that happened, I think we actually had a phone call. I called you too. I said, I was like, Jim said he would do it. I said, do you think there's a sonic space, for both of you guys doing stuff on the
Oh.
album?
Oh, right.
And
You did call me.
yeah. And so, and I was like, okay, this could be really cool. That's kind of when I went back to the charts and then started retooling stuff to make it Jim and Randy were like the engine, and then we were layers on top of that kind of thing. And it ended up working really, really great. You know, yeah, the stuff that you added on there was just, it really, I mean, I'm not just saying this because I'm on your podcast, but I mean, it really just made the record. That was just the interesting tidbits here and there and all the stuff. It was just, I just loved it. So it was super cool.
Awesome.
But I don't know, looking back, I know that I really I like groups like old school Matheny group. I like, obviously Sko's funky stuff, but I also like Bela Fleck and the Flecktones. I like, you know what I mean? Stuff that's just a little bit off the beaten path, but still has that, has that energy and some, elements of pop to it. You know what I mean? I think they're definitely were in this record. Yeah, I don't know if that helps at all or answers your question, but
yeah, I could, mainly just because it's, like, yeah, to have a bass player idea fall through, and then it's like, okay, we have organ, and that would, for some people, that'd be like, okay, we got the closed loop. I got someone to take care of bass, keys, drums, like get in and out, easy session. But I'm always looking, like playing in Earth Radio with 2 keyboards. Sometimes Hannah will, she'll have songs she'll want to play and sing. And then I get the opportunity to kind of, decorate or play within the nooks and crannies. And then, getting to record with Jim, it's that thing of like, oh, what do I do with a a player who's going to use the full range of the instrument just out of necessity, not out of like, ignoring the fact that other keyboard players there. So it was fun to like be able to interact and like, oh, what things do I want to double up? What things were suggested? What kinds of tones do I want? And even at the show, the show we have on Saturday, it's like Jim's gonna bring that Rhodes. I'm gonna have a synth, this piano, just like all these different keyboards on stage.
yeah, no, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's just, yeah. So I mean, it wasn't all fully planned, but it worked out just great, and it's kind of exciting to be in that space where it's like, well, I guess this hasn't been as explored as some other, arrangements or some, groups. It's like, well, okay, this is interesting. I don't know. Part of me wants to kind of continue going down this path. I don't know what the next thing will be, but it's like, wow, that was really fun. I wonder what else we could do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But and I think of someone like like Medeski, Martin, and Wood, like some of the albums they've done, it's like, oh, this is a goofy concept, or they've added players, or they've put their organ trio in, like, I think they did an album with Alarm Will Sound, like a contemporary chamber group, and it's like, or even thinking of like, the Metropole Orchestra, they are, big into this kind of fusion of like, hey, bring your band, and then we'll also be your band. And a new arranging possibilities, and new pairings of sounds. And I wanted to go visit some friends in the Netherlands and try and go see Lewis Cole play with the Metropole. And part COVID, part, trying to get a passport in time, wondering if I could even travel, like, American restrictions of traveling in Europe.
Yeah.
Um, I was just like, I can't make it happen. But just thinking of like those types of moments of like being able to arrange for more kind of sounds than, I don't know, you might be used to just playing in an average band of like, oh, it's me and a bass player and a drummer, or it's, you know, very, very, not, I guess not to say that, like a Julian Lodge's trio is different than, the Bad Plus's trio, or, the trio dynamic conventionally can still be cool, but to, kind of play around with the idea of an organ trio plus other sounds is fun.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And I think it's especially fun too when the players are all. Um, I can tell that everybody was thinking from a compositional standpoint too when they were creating stuff. That wasn't just like you guys were plugging in a hole. You were thinking a lot larger than just simply playing the part or playing the thing on the paper. I mean, it was fun to watch you and Jim kind of collaborate and talk about sounds and what you guys were thinking in between songs and some of those things. And like and that's really that's what really made all of this stuff work. It wasn't just the notes on the page. It was the collaboration and the talking. Oh, maybe we could do this. I think I saw Jim walk over a couple times and tweak your synthesizer like stuff.
Yeah, I often joke that, like, I want to be him when I grow up, in the sense that he, like, sure, yes, career accolades, endorsements, all those things are cool, but the kind of the depth of multifunctional knowledge he has for, like, you know like every kind of keyboard. He's, able to repair them, modify them. It doesn't matter if it's a chipset or a piece of, an electric piano, tuning tines, tuning strings, replacing and repairing key beds, like, programming synths. He's just got this, keyboardist's keyboard player knowledge of of uh of sounds and stuff. So whatever he had, you know, ideas of how to tweak stuff, I'm just trying to be like, okay, what was that knob? You turn that. Oh, that does that. Okay, I just gotta let me try it. Cool. All right, let me remember some part of what he said. So
Yeah,
it was fun.
yeah, it was fun, and I think um, that was all part of it too. From a personnel standpoint, I was really excited to get like you and Caleb in a room with Jim and Randy, and then just as me more being kind of. I mean, I was thrilled to do it, but have these guys who are more established and who've done the thing and been on the scene for a long time, and to see you and Caleb, since I moved back to the area and enjoyed listening to you, whether we're doing gigs at BlueWater or I did some stuff with Caleb with HCJO.
Oh, right.
I really enjoyed listening to you guys. I enjoyed your styles, but I also just enjoyed, being around you guys. And I thought that it would be a really great dynamic. But to get you all in the same room, just to kind of see what would happen was also like a huge, exciting thing for me because it was just kind of like bringing together. Yeah, like I said, like these well established guys who've been doing it for so long, and some fresh faces. I don't know. Do you have do you consider a fresh face, Dutcher?
Yeah, it's funny. I was joking with someone talking about musicians, and it's like, yeah, like there, president's age, and then musicians in music school age. That's like the second tier of like intense stress induced aging. So you feel like you've, lived 20 years in 5 years. But yeah, I'm somewhere, and I've been noticing this too. I'm somewhere in the middle. Like I have my name is out there to enough Michigan musicians to where I don't, I'm still meeting people, but I at least, my name's getting around from just stuff I've done around the state.
Mhm.
Um, and then there's a chunk of the younger generation of musicians that might know me through friends, but it's not like I'm also in every scene. So it's like, okay, there's, not a lot of punk people are going to know about a jazz pianist unless I, start playing and picking up my guitar again and doing some riffs.
Yeah,
um,
you
but
should.
that's one thing I want to carve out time for is more
Mhm.
guitar. Um, and yeah, I'd say it's it's also interesting hearing the you know anytime a new thing pops up, it seems like that's gets attention. There's like the West Michigan music media kind of is like new thing, it happened, and whatever happened before it with the same people doesn't matter. Like that was yesterday, today is the new thing. So I feel like there's still some people who, they might see me as new.
Mhm.
Earth Radio is such a young band,
Yeah.
and they might be meeting or hearing about me for the first time. But I've also been like, yeah, like when you played middle school sports, I was competing for scholarships to go to Blue Lake. Like I won a Bach festival when I was in fifth grade. Like I've been playing music since I was, I've been studying since I was 8, and I kind of was drawn to piano. We found old VHS footage of me like hitting a piano, and like it was a little Yamaha synth, and I'm like pushing until I hear the sound I want, and then pushing until I hear the like the backing track I want, and then I'm not really playing notes, but I'm like kind of hitting things in time, and it's like, I guess I've been playing music long enough to have people know that I do that. Um, but it also could be that thing, like some people get called like, oh, you're a fresh face, but you're like debuting on a label or something. And it's like, oh, the fresh face. It's like, okay, he's 45. He's had a career for like, a few years. But
Right.
yeah, it's a debut on a label. So I guess the long and the short of it is I feel I'm I'm fresh faced to the public, but I feel like I'm not as fresh faced to most of the musicians I've interacted with. Like I know
Yeah.
enough people.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's been fun, kind of getting back after after being gone for so long,
Yeah.
and seeing hitting the ground running. I knew when I came back, it was like, okay, because I had spent, I think I was at home for about 3.5 years, just like, I was helping with the kids. I was writing a huge paper, and I just knew once I got back, like I was ready to start kind of working again. So it was really exciting to kind of see who was on the scene, who was working, who was, what was going on. And uh, and I think one of my first gigs was actually like that HCJO concert, and the first person I walked up to, I think, was Caleb. And
Oh.
I just reached out my hand. I just said, "Hey, I don't know anybody here. I'm Lee." And he said, "Cool." And this is true. He's like, "That's great." He's like, "You're into jazz." I'm like, "Well, yeah. I mean, we talked for maybe 5 minutes. He's like, "Hey, do you want to go to the speakeasy after this? Because Organissimo's in charge of the jam session tonight." And I was like, "Yes." And so I followed him to Grand Rapids after that. We went to go see Jim and Randy, and that was the first time I had actually seen them.
Oh, nice.
live. Oh no! I'd seen them a million years ago before that. But anyways, um, but yeah, that was just kind of so it's been really fun to kind of then start working doing some stuff with BlueWater Kings, um, get to know you guys, and then just kind of see who's working, who's doing things that are interesting, who's just kind of
Yeah.
it's a lot different than it was when I left. I'm not. I mean, I left when I was 20, 28. I left.
Okay.
So, and I'm a lot older than 28 now.
Yeah, I'm 29, so I'm trying to think. If you were 28, what would have I would have been probably still at Grand Valley.
Yeah,
Just
probably.
still thinking like, or still kind of not really knowing. I guess it was weird at Grand Valley because like I only had a year where I was like kind of I guess it happens with every school, at least I feel like I went to it, the first year is always like getting my bearings, meeting some people, figuring out, like what's the ecosystem, who should I start meeting, what should I know.
Mm-hmm.
And that first year in my head it was still like, all right, I'm a performance major. What does that mean? I'm studying classical music in the 2010s. And it's like, what does that mean? And then that second year was like, okay, I got different types of accompanying work for mostly saxophones, like just all that kind of French jazz influenced modern saxophone accompaniment music. and
Mm-hmm.
and then getting linked up with Brad Fritcher, and he kind of introduced me to the the Muskegon music scene. That's where I first met Justin Wieringa and Justin Avdek and like other players from the Lakeshore area. A lot of my first performing gigs were at the Ski Town Tavern. Every Monday we just had a jazz dinner music. And
That's so important, man.
yeah.
When you to have a steady gig when you're figuring things out. If you're able to score something like that, I've had a couple as I was getting my stuff together. That like, man, that that was so huge. It was so huge.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, I used to do the Grand in Grand Haven for a long time,
Yep, I did
for a
that
few
for a year and a
years.
half.
Oh wow, yeah,
Yeah.
nice. Nice. I did that. I did one down in Tampa
Hmm.
for a while. Um, in fact, I think one of my professors just like walked in one of our classes and was like, "I got you guys a gig on Wednesdays. You start this week." And it
Whoa.
was like, you make a few bucks and you get a free dinner. And it was like, okay. And it was on. It was just, but it was that kind of education is just the absolute best. And you got to perform for people. You have to come up with interesting things and set lists and call tunes and all the stuff. But it's kind of hard to do those things anymore.
Yeah, it's you know that I definitely, the time I spent playing with Brad Fritcher over those years at Grand Valley, and a couple years after before he moved, and then um the time in the Gravestones with Hannah Rose. The band was me, this little, at the time, like, oh, I'm a Grand Valley classical pianist. I don't know. I know a little bit of jazz. And, that band's like, all right, the songs are simple forms, but we're stretching and improvising. And it's like, Mario Copeland, this gifted, like, gospel fusion artist on drums. He was Earth Radio's first drummer. Um, and then, Justin Abdeck, who I've been playing with obviously for years since then.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, and Justin Wieringa, multi-talented guitarist, and just having to be in those situations where it's like, oh, we're playing Billy's and it's 9 to 2 in the morning and we have 2 breaks. Just having these moments of like, all right, we're stretching this song for like 20 minutes. And that was such a very one-to-one, like, I learned about, dominant sevens and jazz combo. All right, I'm playing them for 4 hours. Like, what do I do with these chords now? Like, just I think of bands like the Funky Knuckles. This kind of, I jokingly call them like Snarky Puppy's like angsty cousin, because they write like even more difficult fusion music. And it's like pure, like people could dig it, but it's definitely like, this is a musician's band of people who are like really trying to challenge themselves. But they play, the majority of the band, they host a weekly jam session in like Dallas, and then that's playing everything from hip hop to Herbie Hancock fusion tunes to arrangements of top 40 done instrumentally, all sorts of guests coming through that city. And then they have a church gig together, so it's like this band is just
always
cast in
together
steel.
in different situations. That's interesting.
Yeah, and they're all sidemen too for like other ground up music projects, or some of them have played with Beyonce or toured with other you know national touring acts on the side. And um yeah, it's interesting even having those moments. And I've been wanting, ever since we had, years ago when I was playing with Brad, we had this I think it was every Wednesday at Speakeasy, before it became Local Spins Wednesdays. It was Brad Fritcher's Moods, and it would be a rotating cast of like West Michigan bass players and drummers. And some of it might be more straight ahead, some of it was totally like, start a groove, you start a bass line, we'll make something up, we'll quote tunes, we'll solo, we'll interact. That was where I first met Caleb. Just musicians coming in who were curious about this environment. And it kind of culminated in these, like, eventually moved to like an old punk venue that I actually talked about with Brandon Copeland. I interviewed him on a previous episode, and those were crazy because the building's like barely up to code. It's like, oh, I don't know how we got power. And it would range from like, okay, a DJ is doing something, but then that DJ might also join 2 gospel drummers, keys, 2 guitarists, horns, all in this like skater bowl. And we would just you know find old fusion tunes that were like, oh, it's this bass line, and then we can kind of play around that environment. Or it's a modal tune and we can interact rhythmically, or it's a hip hop tune and someone's going to freestyle. Like, it felt like a very open space to be expressive, but also with enough people who had ears and you know a good command of their vocabulary on their instrument or their voice to like make it a fun interactive time.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's all part of it. I think, the other, yeah, that sounds really interesting. I mean, man, I wish I would have been there for that.
Yeah,
Um,
you know once Brad moves back, because he keeps saying he will, we're gonna
Yeah.
try and find somewhere to host again.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. You know, I think too, well, like, as far as the jam session thing goes, you know, it was always important for me um, I was always excited when younger people would show up, and you could tell they're getting their chops together or they're getting their stuff together,
Yeah.
and they would just keep showing up and doing their thing. And it was, you know, I think that's you know, that was that was fun as well. I mean, and that's always something that's been really important to me too. It's you know, bringing the you know, trying to bring the younger generations into it too, because it's really easy to get vibed. It's really easy to
Yeah.
to get, you know, to get a, I don't know if you want to call it jazz, but improvised music can sometimes just be really scary, and it can be really daunting sometimes to get into those spaces. Um, so I, you know, I think that those places need to exist, you know, for people to get real experience um, and just to be around other players to talk shop a little bit and do those kind of things. So yeah, no, I hope that we can get some of those things going again once things pick up.
Yeah, I was reminded of just, just the fun of being around other people kind of doing the same thing when I would work the open mics at Founders, because Founders could accommodate like full bands just showing up. And it's like, all right, you still got 15 minutes, even if it takes you 10 minutes to set up. And we'd get, yes, a million, acoustic guitarists, singer songwriter types, all different types of voices and, backgrounds and styles. But then you'd get like a night where it's like, oh, you got a metal band and a DJ and a jazz duo and someone like the Five, who's he's a hip hop artist that makes like industrial electronic-y sounding beats, and the subject matter is like exclusively about psychedelics. Like he doesn't have any other song about it's like I think the only other he does have a song about how much he loves his wife, who her stage name is Lady Five. and the they it would be interesting seeing like all these different crossroads of people interacting and like the regulars who would show up and have fun hanging out with these different types of people. And then you'd see the progression of like, like, oh, the Five, he started with backing tracks on his phone. He'd have to like physically go over, start the next one. I'd have to like adjust, the volume, and just because it's like, oh, he's learning how to produce stuff or whoever's working with him. And then cut to a few months later, he's got the 15 minutes timed out exactly in a full track with transitions. He's doing crowd work, he's like making a huge impression, and it's like, oh, that's why you need these types of things. Even if it's only 15 minutes, it gets people thinking of like how to organize what they're trying to communicate with their music.
Mm-hmm.
And it's great.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, but yeah, and then hopefully we'll
Yeah.
that'll pick up again at some point.
Yeah. I guess the one thing, um, you know, I was the one lingering album thing that I was wondering
Oh yeah.
that also could um, help people who are thinking of putting out a record, um, in the future. You have been proactive in working with a promoter, and it's been an interesting, point of discussion for Earth Radio and for my, normal mode, like trying to think of like, where do we spend our money? What type of personnel do we want to work with if we don't want to do everything ourselves? Um, so yeah, I was wondering about that whole process of finding a promoter, or if you've worked with them in the past, or yeah.
Um, no, so I've been working with Lisa Reedy, and she's done an incredible job for our record. You know, after talking to a couple of people who have put out records before, after talking to obviously Jim and Randy, I also meet with Corey Christiansen, who's a jazz guitarist out of Utah, but he's put out a bunch of different records. Um, you know, I just know where I am in this stage of my life, and I know after talking to everybody, I understood that like there's a reason people do this, and it's a lot of work, you know, and there's just I can't buy an hour of time these days. So I knew that there was no way I was going to be sending things out and checking back with people and getting in touch. And plus, I lacked a lot of you know, the some of the personal relationships between, some of the people. So I handed off, I delegated that responsibility, um, and was thankful that Lisa was willing to work our record after listening to it. She was into it and thought she could sell it, and did a great job doing it. So it's that was one of those things that I was told I was going to learn a lot just by going through this process, and that was one of the things that I think I learned, that I had no idea about. But I'm thankful that somebody did, and saw the potential and ran with it. Um, but yeah, she's been absolutely fantastic, and yes, and once again, and there's just so much behind all of that people don't think about, um, and I knew that that would just, yeah, I wouldn't have got nearly the amount of um, results if I had tried to do something myself. It just wouldn't have been anywhere close. So
Yeah, it's it's so yeah, it's so important to like, I don't know, acknowledge that too, of like, okay, here's realistically what I want, what I know I'm going to put into a project, and then here are the areas that I need to look at, working with people to have a good impact. Because yeah, you mentioned the relationships too. It's like that's half of the business is just relationships. Just having someone be like, yeah, he's cool, and then suddenly 50 doors open and you didn't know they were there, you just thought it was one door. And to have someone, yeah, just be like, hey, this album's cool, play it, and then someone goes, oh yeah, she's right, and then just play it.
yeah, I mean, in some senses, it's kind of like having another gatekeeper.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, I think the role of record companies has changed, especially in the jazz world, from what I can understand. You know, but yeah, having someone, and two, that person's got to believe in your product, which
Yeah.
they have to sell it, and get people on board, and check in with them, and so they have to be good with it. But yeah, I think it was definitely a thing of knowing, like you said, knowing my limitations, and knowing my time limitations as well as what we could do. Um, and I think too, I think that kind of goes to hand in hand I obviously really believe in the project. And we got done with it. We got the tracks back, and Jim did a fantastic job mixing and mastering, and it was like, gosh, this would just be a shame if I had a hard time which, yeah, I would send it out to the few radio stations I could and tried to do what just tried to do what it wouldn't have made the impact that it would. So, so I'm glad that I was kind of steered toward that direction, and it was a good use of resources getting that going. So,
yeah, and it's all culminating to this album release show, which is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Oh man, I was excited just talking this morning, and some of the biggest, most exciting thing I think is just I love, I wasn't much of a writer, up to a few years ago when I had to start doing it for some recitals and for some other things. But man, I get such a kick out of hearing other people improvise and play on my tunes. I just get this smile, man. I love it. I love hearing what other people do, and it's been such a joy for me. So I'm excited to share that, and I'm excited. I hope other people enjoy it too. So
yeah, I know my grandpa he was kind of like I called him, and because he's been hearing it on Blue Lake, and he called me anytime he hears my name on the radio, he calls to be like, okay, who's Lee and who are all these people? I know Jim and Randy from the Sunday concerts, and I'm like, yeah, that's them, Orianissimo. And so I invited him out to the concert Saturday. He's just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be there. Like, don't worry about how I'm gonna get there. I'm gonna get there.
Oh, that's so awesome.
So I know, and the friends I went to dinner with, I mentioned like, yeah, it's like it's a quintet. There's organ, guitar. I'm gonna have a bunch of different keyboards, and it's like soulful, funky, some New Orleans-y jazz, a good variety of styles.
Yeah.
These dudes are my age, and they were just like, yeah, we don't got anything going on Saturday, like, why not? So it's like there's people who are interested that I wouldn't have expected. It's like, oh, it's a pharmacist who normally goes to metal concerts and dancer who just moved back to town. It's like,
no, yeah,
Jazz is
right.
still alive.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I don't think there's going to be much of there's not going to be like a core demographic, man. I think it's going to be all over the place. I think it's great. I think it's great, and the music's fun. The people are fun. I just like being in a room with all you guys because it's just I don't ever know what's going to happen, and but yeah, it's going to be really cool. So we should have a really great time.
Yeah, definitely. Well, yeah, thanks for carving out a little bit of time. I know I'm getting close to winding down myself, and you probably have seen all the children in one day. And you need sleep. Where do you have a website? I can't remember if you have.
Yeah, LeeHeerspink.com.
Okay.
Believe it or not, I'm the only person named Lee Heerspink in the world. Ish. So yeah, it's just LeeHeerspink.com. And it's got information for kind of what will be up and coming. We got a few things in the works, so I'll keep things posted there. Also links to Bandcamp at the bottom. Some pictures at this point from the session are actually on there.
Oh, cool.
Which is pretty cool. And then as we get some more stuff, some more footage and all that stuff, we'll start posting it there and then sharing it on social media, on Facebook.
Cool. And yeah, the day this will be out, it'll be the day before the concert. So if you happen to be listening, tickets are still available.
Yeah, absolutely.
But cool. Yeah, it was great to, just chat and hear more about the album and the background and other, bits of where you come from as an artist. And looking forward to playing on Saturday.
Yeah, likewise. It's going to be a blast. So if you're hearing this, come on down. It's going to be a great time. So Dutcher, thank you so much for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Glad I could sneak it in. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in to Mitten Backstage. If you are listening to this on Friday, November 12th, that means you have a whole day to see if you want to come out to the listening room at Studio Park. You can look up tickets at listeningroomgr.com. You can go to leeheerspink.com to get all the details about the album and how you can pick it up and all those good things. Hope y'all can join us. Or if you're listening to this after the fact, I'm sure it went very well because we put in the work for it. You can go to patreon.com/Snedeker, Snedeker.com for everything else. But until then, we will see you in the next episode of Mitten Backstage.